Hello, this is Annie, and today's video is about dating Civil War women. And I so wish it was about going back in time and actually dating Civil War women, but it's actually about a few quick tips for determining if your photo that has a woman in it is from the Civil War era of 1861 to 1865 in the USA. So I'm going to give you a few things to look for. This is sort of a beginner's guide. There's so much more to be said about photos from this era, but here's some quick tips. The first thing, and this is a super easy one, is to turn over the photo, whatever kind of photo it is, and see if there is an IRS stamp on the back. They taxed photographs during the Civil War, and there were a couple different rates at different times, different formats, but just look for a stamp on the back. Usually it should be canceled either by hand or with a postmark-like thing, and that pegs a photo to the Civil War pretty securely. Next tip. Look at the shape of the dress that the woman is wearing. Women wore almost exclusively dresses at that time. If you find a woman not wearing a dress, that's a whole different kettle of fish and a different story. The general shape for dresses during the early 1860s was this bell shape. The woman's silhouette is very round at the top and continues round in a sort of round cone all the way to the floor. Underneath these dresses, women wore cage crinolines, which are garments made out of boning and straps that held their dresses out to this extent. And you can sort of see the way the dresses are falling over the last layer of the crinoline towards the bottom. It's not totally smooth. You can see it kind of bend around where they're like halfway down their shin. And they would be very full at the waist, and the waist is kind of high. It's a little higher than the natural waist, close up under the chest. And often these dresses would involve wearing a belt. Belts were very common at this time, or otherwise be cinched in at the waist level. They came in all kinds of fabrics, solids, prints. Prints were very popular at this period. And they also, very importantly, always had buttons down the center front. So the top is like a blouse tucked into a skirt. In reality, sometimes they were separate pieces and sometimes they were sort of loosely sewn together, but it's like a blouse tucked into a huge bell-shaped skirt. And no matter what the style, whether it's fancier like the woman in the middle here or more casual like the woman on the right, it's the same basic shape. Next tip. A detail of the dresses that's very particular to this period is the lowness of the sleeve seam. If you look at where the sleeves are attached on these dresses, which is most obvious in this photo on the left because it's been highlighted with some decoration, that's actually right below her seam, but in that area, these sleeves are attached really low. It creates a very rounded shoulder shape, and it adds to the bell silhouette. This is like a fad in the early 1860s, this placement of the sleeves. And often the sleeves were sort of tighter near the shoulder and then poofed out in different ways. There were different trends. It could be tight at the wrist and poofy in the middle, like the woman on the right. It could be sort of tubular and loose all the way down with an undersleeve, like the woman on the left. Or the woman in the middle actually has, it looks like she has almost a combination of the two. And there was a lot of fabric involved in the sleeves as well as the entire dress. Really, the bodice or blouse was the only tight part. Everything else was tons of fabric. Tip number 4. Another thing that was really trendy during the Civil War was these decorations on dresses that were, I think they were military inspired. These bands of dark colored fabric, and they took lots of different forms, but they were very common. See, the first woman there has stripes on her shoulder, it looks almost like a military uniform type thing, and her dress is sort of plain and a little military looking. The second one, it's more decorative with more like strapping at the hem with little, looks like some kind of brass buttons. Again, kind of gives a military flavor. And the other woman on the right, lots of black stripes. And these take all kinds of forms, but it was a very trendy decoration for dresses. So if you see this, it can help you peg the time frame pretty quickly. And tip 5 is hairstyles. If you see what all these women have in common, even though they're sort of different levels of fanciness, is they have a center part, and it's pretty cut and dry, pretty extreme. Center parts were pretty de rigueur at this point. Once in a while you'll see a woman doing something else with her hair, but almost always you find a center part in the early 1860s. These first two women in the top left, this style is the common everyday style, pulled back from the center part, and there's probably a bun at the back, a low bun, and maybe a little poof out at the ears like the first woman, or just plain pulled back like the second woman. I feel like this is a sort of austere wartime look, but that made it practical for every day during the war. The second woman is wearing a much fancier hairstyle. She has ringlets, which she probably made by letting her hair dry with rags tied in it to create those coil shapes, or she might have used some primitive curling tongs. At any rate, it starts with the same basic part in the middle and 2 lobes of hair, for lack of a better word. Again, the third woman, same deal. She has some fancy crimping, curling stuff going on, but plain center part in the middle. The fourth woman, another, straightforward hairstyle. The young woman on the right top, same hairstyle. And the bottom row, you see the same thing, variations on a theme, sometimes a little bit more ornate and sometimes very straightforward. The sort of lobe shape in the back bottom on some of these is also very common. Sort of goes with the whole roundness of the look. Now I'm going to pop over to eBay and show you some of these photos that have been found in the wild and point out how you could have used the tips to peg down the dates. So very straightforward. Here we have the rounded shoulders, the low seams, the parted hair, the bell shape overall with the skirt that has a crinoline underneath, so it's got that kind of crease near the bottom where it falls over the last hoop. She's got patterns. She's even got some of this banding type decoration, and she has the tubular sleeves over the undersleeves. Here's another one. A sitting portrait, but you can still see she has that belt at her waist kind of high up. It's a blouse with buttons. Look at where those sleeves are attached. It's so low. A modern sleeve these days is usually attached actually at your shoulder, and it makes it a lot easier to move your arms actually. She has the parted hair with that kind of blobby low bun thing going on. Full skirt. Civil War. Here's another one. Here's an older woman, and she's still wearing the same kind of fashion. The belt, the blouse with the buttons, the low attached sleeve. She has the ones that are tight at the wrist and poofy in the middle. She's got parted hair. She has the full skirt. And, things like this little lace collar were common too. People did different kinds of ornamentation and styles, and her dress looks like a fancier material than some of them. Maybe it's a satin or taffeta or something like that. Whereas a lot of the other women in the checks and stripes and polka dots are wearing cotton. But this is just a variation. Okay, here's a trickier one because you're just seeing a tiny bit of her. But notice the very characteristic hairstyle. This little tie, which is again kind of uniform, like it's a nod to men's fashion at the time. And the very rounded corners, her shoulders, and you can even see the sleeve is attached quite low. Even though you can see very little of her, you can still make out a lot of the characteristics of the era. Here's another one. Again, you see the banding decoration, hair parted in the middle, these big bell sleeves that are attached low, and she has some undersleeves underneath, and her belt. Probably if you studied this carefully, you could see the buttons down the center of her blouse, and you can definitely see her skirt is belling out even though she's sitting down. Okay, here's some trickier ones. These are tiny little gem tintypes, and you can still date them pretty well. Here's an older woman, and she has a bonnet, but she still has that hairstyle, and she still has the buttons down the front and the curved shoulders, and you can sort of intuit that her sleeves are attached really low. This woman, again, a little trickier. Her shoulders aren't as rounded, but you get that sense, especially on the left, that she's going for that bell shape, but maybe she just has really square shoulders. She's got the blouse. You can't really see her hair, but could well be parted in the middle. Here's more different ages of women, and again, parted hair, buttons down the center. These pins or brooches were pretty common as jewelry at the period. Here's some more. She has that black banding and the buttons and the parted hair and the very round shoulder silhouette. And woman next to her, same deal, very rounded shoulders. There's a part in her hair, even though it's a different kind of style. She's got the little pseudo cravat type tie thing going on. No, actually it's just trim, but it's that heavy black trim on her dress with a brooch. And even these two at the bottom, they, this, I mean, the woman on the left is hard to date, I'll admit it, because she's really covered up. And her veil looks like it could be a later morning outfit, but paired with the popularity of gem tintypes at this era and her hairstyle, what you can see of it, and the rounding of her shoulders, what you can see of it, Civil War is a pretty good guess for this. This one I'd have, I wouldn't, say I'm 100% certain on, but based on the overall style and the similarity to other photos of this particular era, I would say Civil War is a very safe bet. And finally, again, the woman on the right here has a funky hat that is the kind of thing that was more popular in other times. Like bonnets were in fashion in the 1860s more than this kind of jaunty hat, but not unheard of. People wore them, and it's hard to see what her silhouette is because she seems to be wearing a shawl around her shoulders, but if you look closely you can get a sense of how her dress is constructed with the and you get the center buttons, and you can kind of see that her shoulders are sloping down into that curvy shape. So again, these last two, tricky, but I mean, they'll go as Civil War in my book. So that is a quick tour of some women of the Civil War era in photos and how to date them. Thanks.